Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Greg Fleming. I'm the Deputy Chair of the Petitions Committee, and I'm chairing today in the absence of our Chair. So we'll just get my other committee members to quickly introduce themselves.
I'm Paulo Garcia, I'm National MP for New Zealand.
Kia ora, I'm Jan Tinetti representing Labour here today.
Kia ora, I'm Kahurangi Carter. I'm from the Green Party list, and hi Juliana, and I am based in Christchurch.
Hey, well, thank you very much for all of you being here today. We also have sitting at the other end of the table, which is where if you guys were here in person, you'd be sitting. We've got from Whaikaha, we've got Helen Walker and Rebecca Elvy. So they'll be presenting after you guys, and we've found with the way the Petitions Committee rolls is that it's easier sometimes to have a bit of a group conversation because everyone is here to genuinely hear your issue rather than it being an adversarial nature, which can be seen in some contexts. So thank you very much for what you have submitted. You could take your written submissions as thoroughly read by us. We've got 10 minutes for you guys to present now. Up to you as to how you want to use it, but I would encourage you to leave as much time as possible at the end of your presentation so that we can engage with questions. Over to you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Ko Juliana tōku ingoa, and my sign name is DJ Rowling. I'm here on behalf of Access Matters Trust as a lead petitioner. As you know, Neil Jarvis and Dr. Claire Flemmer, who are subject experts and Access Matters supporters, are also speaking today. And we are here to call for really courageous, a bold bill that can make disability rights in New Zealand. I hope you understand that accessibility is a precondition for the fulfillment of basic human rights that many of you take for granted when you have an impairment. And here in Aotearoa, 1 in 6 people, around 900,000 people, have a disability. And every day we face barriers at schools, public spaces, online, at work. And accessibility is not just a disability issue, it benefits everyone. We know that parents with prams, seniors, children, tourists, and anyone with a temporary injury. And yet we continue to design systems that exclude, and this exclusion comes at a really personal cost, but it also costs our economy billions in lost potential. So I don't want to repeat myself, but what we need is a comprehensive legislation in co-design with disabled people, Tangata Whakaha Māori, Whanohawa, and the deaf community. And we need, and it's already written, we just kind of need to copy and paste. We need to translate the UN CRPD into domestic legislation and make accessibility a legal right with enforceable standards. We need an independent oversight body to monitor and enforce compliance, a way that people can notify when they face barriers, and a free dispute resolution process. And of course, we need a national campaign to raise awareness and to shift societal attitudes. And I will pass now to Dr. Claire Flemmer, and then Neil will speak, and then we can address any questions that the committee might have for us. Thank you. Dr. Claire, to you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Claire Flemmer from Massey University School of Built Environment, doing research onto the accessibility of buildings for people with disability. The current NZS 4121 is 23 years old and it urgently needs revision reflecting universal design principles. I have 5 brief points to make on this. 1, we have to stop thinking that disability is something that happens to a small group of people in New Zealand. It will affect every one of us. That means you, me, a friend, a family member at some point, either through a medical condition, an accident, or as we age. So it's really important we view this as a whole of New Zealand issue. Point 2, who's going to pay for improved accessibility? The answer is every taxpayer with a social program like the New Zealand pensions, because that's the only way to spread the cost fairly amongst everyone. With government subsidies for accessible features, we will achieve better building access for people with disabilities. Point 3, how do we go forward and what are the priorities? We've surveyed New Zealand people with many different types of disabilities, and they've told us exactly which buildings are the hardest to access and what are the worst accessibility problems, so we can provide a clear list of priorities for improvement, recognizing that we can't fix everything, but we've got to make a start. Point 4, how do we monitor and enforce inclusive access? For public buildings, we add the accessible features to the building warrant of fitness, the BWAF, alongside other critical systems like the fire safety systems. The building then has annual inspections and fines for non-compliance. Finally, we don't expect our pensioners to demonstrate that they are worthy of receiving a pension, and in the same way, we shouldn't expect our people with disabilities to prove that they are worthy of being included in society. They deserve the same quality of life as everyone else. They should be able to participate in society and not be stuck at home alone and depressed because they can't access buildings. Thank you.
And my name is Neil Jarvis, and kia ora everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you all. I just want to make a couple of brief points as well that really come to the question of why this really matters to us. And I'm going to focus on the area that I know well. I work in the field of digital accessibility, access to information, that kind of thing. And there are a couple of very real examples that I have experienced and that will be echoed many, many times by people in our community. So they're not just ones that affect me. I remember when I was coming back to New Zealand in 2022. It was that brief period that year when the borders were open. And I was coming back to New Zealand and I was minutes away from being unable to board my flight, not because of anything I'd done, not because I was late to the airport, but because the health declaration that we quite rightly had to fill in at that time in order to be able to re-enter the country was totally inaccessible to me, whether that was on the website or on my mobile phone. Now, that was unforgivable, especially since it was a government department that was supposed to be driven by the web accessibility guidelines that already existed. Flash forward to today, and that still continues. You can now come home to New Zealand and fill out an online declaration form rather than the old paper one that we're used to doing. But if you do that, you can only do that on the website if you're a screen reader user like myself. You cannot use the app, even though the app is available to everybody else. It's inaccessible. It's a government department. It's not right. And I suspect that the reason for that is that the current web accessibility guidelines that the government is trying to enforce only refer to websites. They don't refer to mobile apps. But how many of us rely on mobile apps these days rather than websites? And lastly, I would say this is echoed throughout society, not just government departments, but local government as well, and the private sector. And so even with the improved web accessibility standards that currently are being introduced, it's not enough because they only apply to central government. They don't apply to the rest of the economy, and that's a real problem. So the problems that we are having are as a result of the failure of the noble effort to try and persuade people to do the right thing, and that is why we need legislation. And we're happy to take any questions that people might have.
Thank you very much, all of you. Over to questions.
The government did, I think under the Labour government, have an accessibility bill that was being progressed, which has been stopped. And whether you see that as good or bad, it has been. So there is an opportunity here for the government to take another look at those accessibility standards. You've given us some really clear guidance as to what could be included in that. Do you see that as one bill, or do you see that as multiple, you know, in the Buildings Act and then maybe within Kāinga Order as well?
I think there's the opportunity to actually do a thorough consultation with the community and engage with the people in parliament that actually draft the bills to find out what will be the best outcome. Right now, there will be amendments that could improve existing legislation, but our preference will be to have an overarching bill that is rights-based, with a rights-based approach that guarantee the articles in the UN CRPD into disability rights in New Zealand. It has to be something that will prevent any further legislation to be created that would generate barriers. Because the problem is that at the moment, we are constantly putting actually public money into barriers that later need to be retrofitted, and that cost way more money. So if we start doing things right from the start, it will benefit everyone. And another point that I wanted to make is around, I know that in the mind of politicians and a lot of other people comes like, but what is the cost of making things accessible? I ask you to make a reflection and ask what is the cost of exclusion, because it costs so much to keep the status quo right now, not only in money, but also human potential. And I've seen in other countries where you have legislation pushing for change, and it's a win-win-win. It creates new business opportunities. It actually creates a new industry, the industry of accessibility. It drives innovation and allows people who were not consumers or could not work to actually engage in all those parts of society.
Okay. Thank you very much, Juliana. That is an excellent opportunity, I think, with our 10 minutes as well, and just where you've taken the discussion. If we then pivot to Whaikaha now, likewise, you guys have 10 minutes and same context. You can take your excellent written submission as fully read, 10 minutes. Now, in your case, at the end of this, we have allowed 5 minutes for a more ranging discussion. So if for those of you who are online and you're able to stay, please do so. Listen to what Whaikaha say, and we may be able to have some cross questions and discussions at the end of this. So over to you guys.
Thank you. Kia ora tātou. I'm Rebecca Elvy, DCE Outreach and Innovation at the Ministry of Disabled People, Whaikaha. My sign name is, which I think is reference to my red hair. With me is Helen Walker, who is the Group Manager of Policy in our Policy and Insights Group. Thank you to the committee for inviting Whaikaha to present on these two petitions. Improving accessibility for disabled New Zealanders is a key focus for Whaikaha. Last year, the Minister for Disability Issues, Minister Upston, decided not to go forward with the Accessibility for New Zealanders bill. The Minister considered that the bill, as drafted, was not fit for purpose, and that while legislation can be an enabling factor, the most effective means of improving accessibility are likely to be non-legislative. Instead of progressing legislation, the Minister asked Whaikaha to develop an accessibility work program to make tangible improvements to accessibility in New Zealand. This work program is based on the idea that most people and most organisations either want to do the right thing in terms of accessibility but don't know how, or they're not aware of the ways that what they are doing is creating barriers for disabled people to access or participate. The work program consists of a mix of shorter and longer term initiatives focused on raising awareness and making it easy for people and society to do the right thing with regards to access for disabled people. The work program is structured around 4 key areas where accessibility can be improved. The built environment, and I'm really happy to let those online know that we've recently agreed that there will be a review of NZS 4121 in the near future. Digital and information accessibility, transport, and emergency management and response. There's also another category for initiatives that don't naturally fit within these, such as guide dogs, which can span built environment and transport. We're also working with community representatives, including some people on this call, to establish an advisory group to help Whaikaha with the identification, prioritisation and delivery of these initiatives. Alongside this, Whaikaha is leading a number of other activities that will improve accessibility. We're currently refreshing the New Zealand Disability Strategy with input from the disability community. The 5 priority outcome areas of the refreshed strategy are education, employment, health, housing, and justice. Accessibility is a key issue which runs throughout all of those outcome areas. The working groups for each outcome area include officials, community members, and industry representatives. Many working group members have expert knowledge on some of the key accessibility issues in those areas. Whaikaha is also refreshing the Accessibility Charter. This is an all-of-government commitment to work progressively to ensure all public information is accessible and that disabled people can interact with government services in ways that meet their needs. When Whaikaha was established as a new standalone ministry in December last year, we took on responsibility for the government provision of information in alternate formats. Whaikaha is currently stabilising and enhancing the alternate format service and collaborating with the Department of Internal Affairs to make improvements in digital accessibility as well as web accessibility. Whaikaha is committed to supporting disabled people to be involved in government decision making. We facilitate opportunities for disabled people, tangata Whaikaha Māori and their whānau to contribute to key areas of work across government in a number of ways. We fund the Disabled People's Organisations Coalition in its role as a member of the Independent Monitoring Mechanism, or IMM, and the IMM promotes, protects and monitors the implementation of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The DPO Coalition is a powerful voice for disabled people across government. Whaikaha is also supported by a strategic advisory group with membership from across a broad range of disability organisations, including some that are not members of the DPO Coalition. This advisory group is intended to challenge our thinking, help us identify areas for improvement, and to create ways for diverse disabled voices, including those of family, whānau and carers, to be heard. The refresh of the New Zealand Disability Strategy, which we mentioned earlier, is being undertaken in collaboration with working groups that include members of the disability community. The wider disability community will be consulted on the draft strategy within the coming months, and we welcome feedback from disabled people. We also administer a nominations database, which collects expressions of interest from disabled people with relevant skills and experience so they can be considered for nominations for relevant governance and advisory positions on state sector boards and committees. We are also working with the Public Service Commission on a 4-point plan that will support the creation of employment opportunities within the public service for disabled people. This can support more disabled people being included in government decision-making processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just have one clarifying question just came through in the written submissions. It's from the petitioner, I believe, saying that 1 in 6 New Zealanders carry a disability. Is that correct? Can I just ask what the definition of that is?
So the data from which that is obtained is a Stats NZ survey, the disability survey, and it asks a series of questions about areas of daily life within which people have some form of impairment.
Right.
And it identified approximately 850,000 New Zealanders meet the conditions within those questions.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Other questions?
I'm interested to understand, I think this work is amazing. Firstly, really advocate for nothing about us without us and having meaningful participation and governance with people with lived experience. And I know Whaikaha itself has a larger percentage of people who identify as being disabled than most government departments to do this, so that's cool. I'm still trying to understand why we wouldn't legislate for something like, I think it was 100% of kāinga order homes to be accessible, or 90%, 100%. Because if it's in legislation, then it has to happen. And in Christchurch, I have a constituent and I have his permission to talk about this. He lives in a kāinga order home. He was institutionalised because the home wasn't accessible. He fell, and he's in his young 20s and was looking at a life of institutionalisation in an old folks' home at 20 years old, even though he wanted to live independently. And and if his home was accessible, then that wouldn't have happened, and he would still be feeling safe in his own home and community. So, yeah, what is the rationale around not legislating for it?
Do you want to come in?
Yeah. So I guess it's really about, I guess there's a couple of points I'd make. One is that to enable that kind of thing, you need funding, and you need, I guess, to me, those decisions really sit with the government of the day, rather than necessarily being something that is set in legislation by Parliament, because they do require, you know, ongoing commitments of funding and prioritisation of things on the work programme, and that's the kind of thing that I guess the government of the day makes decisions on, juggling a lot of priorities and working within a number of constraints. I suppose the other point is that legislation is not needed to enable something like that to happen. So I guess the point that I've come back to often in working on this is that sometimes, even though you might have something enshrined in legislation, it's actually still very difficult to make it a reality. Mm-hmm. And I guess what we're doing with this work is trying to focus on the other stuff that needs to be in place to enable improvements to accessibility, like Rebecca's outlined.
Okay, Jan.
Thanks, and lovely to see you, Helen. Yes, I just really want to sup on that is that the accessibility bill, and I know that the Minister said that the majority of submitters did not agree with it, but it wasn't that they didn't want a bill. My understanding is that it didn't go far enough for the majority of submitters, and or they absolutely wanted a bill. So why was the rationale to take it away completely and not put it back to the drawing board and make that bill a stronger proposition so that they could even take it back to work with disability groups to make it stronger and to give it more weight and more legs, so to speak? Well, I mean, the submitters on the whole wanted quite significant change to the bill. So I guess that's the kind of a procedural issue there. But I think what the Minister articulated as her rationale was that she felt it was better to take a step back from legislation as the way to bring about change and try to focus on more concrete, tangible steps that could be taken, and that's what she's asked us. Can I just supplement? So that being the case, in your opinion with the groups that you work with, is that enough? Because it seems to me that there's still this desire to see themselves represented in legislation that's going to be enabling legislation, because from what I can see and read and talk to, and just like Juliana said, I've got personal experience here as well, is that not having it in legislation does not go far enough, because it can become a tick box exercise unless you start making things compulsory. It can get overseen. So in your opinion, with the groups that you're working with, where do you see this going? Is there going to be a move towards legislation? Is what you're doing enough now? Because it doesn't seem to be that that's the case.
I think it'll be really important that we evaluate the accessibility work program as we go, and we're designing that into the work program at the moment, because I think that untapped opportunities that don't require legislation are actually quite significant. And my own experience tells me most people do want to do the right thing, and it's often because they either don't know or they don't know how. And there are lots of ways that things can be improved. I mean, for example, local councils could be including terms and conditions and contracts for procurement for road workers to make sure that footpaths were still accessible while roadworks were underway. There's all sorts of things like that that are very concrete and, sorry for the pun, tangible, that would make a real difference. that don't require legislation. They just require people to have a bit of a think about what is happening at the moment and how it could be changed.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but can I just ask, and it's just a clarification, but they don't have to, do they? So those councils can choose to do that or not. They would be wrong, in my opinion, not to do that. But the bottom line is, without that guiding legislation, they don't have to. They can choose not to have that there.
And I think in some instances, even when legislation exists, they can choose not to. So I suppose what I'm most concerned with is to ensure that the change happens, whether or not that's in legislation.
I would say, if I can I add something?
Yeah, sure, Juliana. Yeah.
I think there's, I think like it's a political decision, right, that sits in Parliament. So we cannot ask the public servants to respond why it hasn't been in place. But the other thing is, what we need is a total change in culture and values. I truly believe that why New Zealand is so far behind in terms of disability rights is because we live in a very ableist society. For some reason, we still think here as a society that having a disability make you worse off, make you less. It's quite confronting, but we need to have these courageous conversations. Why do you think that it's okay that I need to go through the back door or not get to any place at all because I'm in a wheelchair? Why no one take a stand in this? This is not okay. Why someone like Neil cannot go online and make his shopping like everybody else who's sighted, and it's just fine, you know? So we need to kind of, why being treated not as equal and less for citizen, it's okay. It's not okay. I have a dear friend who's also a disability advocate. She said that if people without impairments put up with a third of what we put up every day, there will be a civil war. But we prefer non-violent resistance. We prefer engage in a positive way. And I truly believe that legislation with enforceable standards is a tool to accelerate this societal cultural shift that we need. You know, you can see as an affirmative action that will reduce the gap. We can wait and we can rely on the goodwill of everybody to do the right thing. Yeah, right. That's not how.
Okay, sorry, just we've got one more question from Paulo, and then
Just a
we're
quick
probably
one.
going to need to wrap.
Yes,
Yeah.
just a quick one to Rebecca and Helen. Corollary to the Honourable Tinetti's question. My question is, have the community that you are dealing with and the working groups that you're dealing with, have they expressed an understanding of what you're trying to do, which is to implement what you can now? And what is the feedback?
We probably both have something to add on that. I think many in the community would echo the views of the petitioners in terms of they would prefer both. We should do all of the things and we should have legislation. And that's not our role as public servants to ascertain which of those is the right approach.
Okay,
Sure.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah.
The week before last, youth MPs were here in Parliament, and in this room here, there was a working group who reported back on their findings, and I just thought this was one of their findings. They were so clever and articulate, and it was like quite motivating. We could probably learn something as MPs from how prepared these youth MPs were. But this was one of the findings that they made. They concluded that, quote, support, if it arrives at all, often comes after a long strenuous battle, end quote. And quote, no one should have to exhaust themselves for basic access. And this is from young disabled youth MPs. And I just thought they were in here saying these words a few weeks ago, and that would be a nice place to honour them.
Thank you very much, Kahurangi. Okay, we'll wrap it there. To those of you, to the petitioners online, thank you very much. And to Rebecca and Helen from Whaikaha, thank you very much as well.
Thank you. Thanks very much.